So, greetings, hello, shalom, peace to everyone. Today is, again, it's Sunday, and it's my fasting day, and my talk against the madness of the politics of the world that are going on at the moment. 17th of November, and I'm going to be talking about various things to do with international relations and politics, focusing mostly on the problems of Brexit and Remain, how to get some intelligence accepted as a common strategy at the coming general election in the UK, which I'll be voting in, obviously, like millions of other people. So this last week I've been busy with my manifesto that I launched. And I set up the Centre for Remain Studies. I prefer the word Remain, which is the opposite to Brexit. Other people use the term Remain. Obviously, I'm a Remainer. Well, no, I'm not. I'm a Remainer. However, it's very interesting in this last week watching the social media discussions on the television and radio and so on. People are starting from different places, and I know people that are all aspects of the political spectrum, from the Conservatives to the radical Communist Party or whatever. And I've studied political science at university and taught it for many years. I was head of citizenship in schools in the UK, and I love political philosophy. I've studied it and written about it, and obviously my PhD is in peace studies, which is, you can't have peace unless you actually look at politics. So in my periodic table of the world's religious and philosophical traditions, political science is one of the fields. And I think this Brexit is the biggest challenge to the UK's politics since the UK was founded. Really since 1603. People haven't really realised this, and we're being rushed into making this decision now at the general election. This is the most important general election or political process since 1603, when the UK was created. Because depending on the outcome of this election, the entire future of the United Kingdom itself is up for stake now. What kind of a country do we want? Now, there are people on the left who will say, that's why we have to vote for Labour, because we need socialism. The whole thing is a problem of capitalism, and the whole Brexit, blah, blah. There are people on the Liberal Democrats who will say, yes, that's why we have to vote Liberal Democrat, because it's a crisis, a catastrophe of extremism, both left and right. We have to come together, rally, support the country. There are people in the Conservative Party who say, yeah, that's why we should vote Conservative, because everyone else is going to break up the country. We're the only party of unity. There are a few people who say, well, we shouldn't vote because, gosh, I'm spiritual. I've transcended that duality. I don't deal with all that stuff. I'm just meditating away, and I've gone off with the angels, and God will sort it out. Whatever happens, Brexit, Remain, it doesn't matter whoever's in power. The angels will take care of it. I renounce, involvement. Again, there are many people like that. Some groups, like Jehovah's Witnesses, simply don't vote. They don't participate in politics because it's beneath them. So anyway, there's a whole spectrum, and there are a few fanatics on the right, Brexit Party types, who will say yes, vote Brexit Party or Tory Party because we hate everyone that isn't British and white, and we want the right to keep all these people out of our country that aren't part of us, and we love Hitler. I mean, there was a terrible thing recently in the press. And you find these extreme right types all over the world, all over the English-speaking world. They're the kind of guys that go into mosques and start shooting, or into Sweden and start shooting social democrats, like as if they're a threat. And that's the kind of mentality of the guy in New Zealand that went into the mosque and started shooting. They've just found the police in Italy. There was a plot by these hard-right fascist types in Italy to go and blow up a mosque, and they were tunneling underneath it, putting pipe bombs into drains, and were going to blow the whole thing up and kill everyone. I mean, So those people are saying we need to vote for Brexit because that way we can stop Muslims coming in, and because then we can have a war with the Muslims and we'll all have Third World War. And Steve Bannon seems to be of that variety. He goes and lectures to these extreme anti-Muslim types, and they're making a little network all over Britain and Europe of hard right, stockpiling the ammunition in the basement type things for the coming war. Gosh, so there's those guys, right? So there's the whole political spectrum. There are the Greens, of course, who say, well, we should vote Green because really what's at stake here is the entirety of nature, and forget about all this storm in a teacup about Brexit. It's saving the environment that matters, and global warming is going to finish us off anyway. So that's why we should all go into London and lie down in front of the traffic. And there's value in that position, but they've made a very intelligent pact with the Liberal Democrats and with Plaid Cymru. And of course there's Plaid Cymru and the SNP who are saying, well, we don't know really, but let's at least keep our nation in the light and let's have independence, which is the SNP position. Plaid's position really as well. Like, Westminster is so corrupt, we can't help to save it. It's gone too far. Boris Johnson has sold the country to oligarchs from Russia and America. Some of the billionaires have taken over the Tory party, hijacked it. We can't save the UK. What we can do is save Scotland, get it out of the UK, and at least then we can control what happens north of the border. And Plaid are beginning to come round to that view. They realise the only way to save Wales is actually take it out of the UK. Okay, so those are all the voices. You will hear others probably as well. And I'm talking here about UK politics. American politics is a whole other story, but I'm watching that with fascination. I'll come back to that at the end. So, as a political scientist and a philosopher, I've thought about this in great detail. And I want to present a possible solution here. It won't necessarily satisfy everyone, but I think it will lead to the greatest happiness for the greatest number, which is the goal of philosophy. See, Aristotle, my line manager, was a great inventor of ideas. He invented political philosophy as a science, which I also believe in, and I've studied the subject in great depth. And Aristotle said the purpose of politics is to create happiness for the community at large. I don't see happiness in the UK. I see a lot of very upset people. We need to find a way to recover that lost happiness. That's what my job as a philosopher is. I'm a great lover of Christ as well, and we have many churches throughout the UK. They should be resounding with Christ's perspective on this. What would he say? Well, I know that Christ, when he was giving his sermon in public, he said, look, what's the path to happiness? That was his focus. It's as if he'd been reading Aristotle, and I suspect he had actually occasionally. Because he gave his sermon, he said, blessed are they, or happy are they who are pure in heart, for instance. They're going to see God. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means purify your consciousness, do your prayers, your meditation practice, avoid lies, avoid robbery, avoid violence, be loving to your neighbours. That's how you purify consciousness, and that way you eventually find God. It's all there in the Sermon on the Mount. But what I'm saying is Christ's teaching was about how to find happiness. Well, that's very important for political philosophy to remember, because we, UK, Europe, we still are a largely Christian country and culture, and we should be having these debates within that context, as well as all the other faith traditions, intellectually and spiritually. So, in order to do that, we have to have some kind of logic system at work. And rather than address everything all at once, I'm going to propose that we follow the logic of what I call a steeplechase, like the Grand National. So we have so many challenges coming at us. There's austerity, there's nationalism, there's religious disunity, there's the second referendum of the EU, there's the Scottish second referendum coming up, etc., etc. Now, what order do we tackle them in? Some people say this order. Oh, there's global warming. That's another one coming up. There's oppression of women and women's rights, which is, Joe Swinson and the feminists of Parliament are into that one. And so there's all these problems coming up. How do we tackle them all? Well, I'm saying we have to have a sequence, a logical sequence, an order of prioritisation. Like a steeplechaser, you can't jump all the fences at the Grand National all at once. You have to take them in sequence. And that way you might win the race. If we can jump all these problems, they're all coming at us. So I'm going to suggest a logical way of dealing with them as a way through here. Okay, so to me, the first immediate problem, the first fence that's coming up in the immediate few weeks is the general election, right? If we're going to jump that fence, which is a huge fence, my concern as a Remainer, as a Bremainer, is to ensure that we get a majority of people elected to Parliament in the House of Commons for the UK who are going to be against Brexit and for a second referendum. We won't get a majority for revoke Article 50. That's a silly idea, with all due respect to my Lib Dem friends. You know, you can see where they're coming from, enthusiasts, blah, blah, blah. But it's not going to happen. What we're going to be able to get is a majority for a second referendum. Okay, how are we going to get that? That's the huge puzzle. Well, I'm saying if you work it out logically, as I have done, as a philosopher, I've been taught to think logically. There's only one way we can do it, for sure, guarantee, and that is a general overall Remain Alliance or Remain Alliance. Building on what the Lib Dems, Lib Dems and Plaid and the Greens have already done, they've only done it for 50 seats. We have to extend that nationwide to all 600 whatever seats by bringing in Labour and the SNP and the Greens nationwide. And I'm noticing that, I mean, there are all kinds of challenges in that. That's the first hurdle we have to get over. Well, I put forward the way to do that in my manifesto. And what I'm heartened by is that people are realising this is the only way to go. I mean, I'm not the only person saying this. It's really the essence of tactical voting. All I'm suggesting is tactical voting. And if our leaders of these main Remain parties won't have the decency and humility to actually make a formal pact in this way, then we the people have to do it for them. And my Lib Dem activist friend Jack Dart, Green activists in Pembrokeshire who've just stood down their candidates so that the Labour can have a chance of winning. It's happening in microcosm around the country. We the people will do this. We have to vote tactically. Now, that can be challenging, but it's the only way to ensure a victory. So whoever is highest in the polls or is coming first in the last general election or the last election, you can work it out. There are various tactical voting pollsters online sites you can look at. So, for instance, in Worthing, where my sister lives, is a Tory sitting MP. The only person that has the slightest chance of defeating that person is Labour. Lib Dems nowhere to be seen, Greens nowhere to be seen. So, in this tactical voting Remain National Pact, anyone that wants to stop Brexit has to vote Labour. It's as simple as that. And let's encourage everyone. The Lib Dems, the Greens should stand down and let that Labour person win. In Scotland, where I'm voting from my old abode at the Castle of the Muses, there's only a Tory and an SNP candidate. The others are nowhere to be seen. If I vote for anyone else, Green, Lib Dem, it's a wasted vote, and the Tories might get in. So I'm saying stand down the Lib Dems, stand down the Greens, stand down Labour, because they're nowhere to be seen either. And everyone who wants to stop Brexit should vote for SNP. Well, no, can't do that, say the Lib Dems, because, God, they want a second referendum and independence. Well, wake up, where have you been for the last 10 years? The Scots are going to get independence, whether you vote, whoever you vote for, because the groundswell is so huge now. When I lived on Loch Goil and saw the loch changing its water level, I learned about tides, Tides are unstoppable. When that high tide's coming in at Loch Goil and the submarines are coming in to test their sonar equipment, I can do my King Canute and stick a chair in the middle of the loch and say, go back waves, but it's not going to happen. I'm afraid the Scots, and I love them dearly, deserve their second independence referendum. And it's very probable they will this time vote for it. I'll come back to that point in a minute. But I think that all the Remain parties, in my Remain Pact I'm proposing, I think we have to accept, the SNP won't join that unless we all say, okay, you're gonna have a second referendum on Scottish independence. That's another fence a bit down the lane. I'll come to that in a minute. So the first thing is getting the Remain Pact agreed. And if the leaders won't agree it, we the people have to do it. This is about people power. The next thing to come up is, okay, so let's say we manage to get into Parliament. Let's say we win the majority. Well, what kind of second referendum? What are we pledged to? Well, it has to be under different terms than the first one. It has to be more fair. All the parts of the UK have to vote to come out. And I think everyone over 16, 17-year-olds should all get to vote. And also European citizens should be able to vote. I live mainly in France, and you know, I love France, I love Europe. I'm a Europhile. My parents loved Europe. I was brought up to think as a European. You know, I'm not just an English person, although my culture is English, my language is English, and my thought world is Shakespearean and English in that respect. But Shakespeare was a Europhile and travelled widely on the continent, which is why all his plays are so magnificent. You know, I don't want to live in a dumbed down little England. I love Scotland, Wales, Ireland, the whole of Europe. I want to stay in the European Union. So I think our European Union neighbours who've gone to live in the UK should also vote. So the terms of a second referendum, very different to the first. More fair, actually. Now, of course, all the Tory media, the right-wing media will grumble, but, you know, sorry, they're absolutely in the hands of oligarchs who have fascist tendencies of totalitarianising our country and destroying democracy. What I'm proposing for the second referendum is actual democracy. It's how it should have been done the first time. Let's get it right this time. And let all the Remain Pact people pledge to that. Right, so what about, okay, so let's agree that then. Now other people say, no, the real problem is austerity. It's the impoverishment of the UK. People sleeping rough, homeless, you know, shocking statistics. I mean, and that should be the absolute second priority of a Remain government. So once a Remain government comes into power, and it have to be an alliance, they can work out, you know, who gets which cabinet post or who's prime minister. I still think that the former Speaker of the House should be prime minister of a neutral Remain government. You know, I think that he did such a good job sort of chairing Parliament that I think he would make an excellent Prime Minister, but, you know, what do I know? And anyway, so the parties, Plaid Cymru, SNP, Labour, Lib Dems, Greens, would all form a reforming government. Now, this is a huge, huge reforming government. What I'm suggesting is as important as the Parliamentary Reform Act of 1832, which gave us modern democracy. We have to renew our compact with democracy in the United Kingdom. Some people don't like democracy. It's untidy, it's messy. They prefer fascism. They prefer racism. They prefer, you know, like, why should all the black people vote? Just give the vote to the whites kind of thing. Or let's go back to a property thing where only the very rich can vote. I'm sure the oligarchs that run the Daily Telegraph and their set would love that. Only people with a home worth 100,000 or more should vote. Only Daily Telegraph readers should vote, actually, would be their view. Guardian readers should be actually just like banned from the country. It's put in camps. You know, that's how these people think, right? As for Morning Star people, well, you know, put them in camps, obviously. Well, no, thank you. I'm saying let's renew genuine democracy. That means give people the power to actually make decisions, but also for that purpose they have to be educated. You see, Pericles and the Athenian Democrats knew that you can't have democracy functioning unless you have education. It's funny that, isn't it? Philosophy, education, higher education, university, everything we love in intellectual work in the West was born in the same place where democracy was born, in Athens. Because the intellectuals of Greece and Athens realised that for democracy to work, you have to have intelligence, you have to have education. So that's the two-pronged strategy I'm proposing as a teacher and a philosopher. That's what we have to do to save our country. Get it back into democracy, but also make a renewed covenant with education. I love my country. I love the United Kingdom because I always thought it was a clever and intelligent and wise and deeply loving country. As I grew up, my parents were wise people. I mean, everyone has their foibles, but on the whole, George and I in Daffodil were clever, intellectual and caring people. My circle of friends, my teachers at university, my teachers when I trained to be a teacher and so on. Britain is full of very clever people, so let's renew our compact with education. And let's end the problems of austerity. Now, what I'm proposing is that in my Prevailing Manifesto, if you read it, I'm saying absolutely at a stroke, simply get rid of it by cancelling this universal credit thing, which is a catastrophe, and bringing in a citizens' income scheme. It's the only fair way to deal with poverty in Britain. Every person living in the British Isles, should be entitled to a citizen's income, a basic living wage. They can afford to live. They can afford some rent, and to eat and to warm their flat or whatever. And also, along with that, can come much more liberalism in terms of planning permission, because there's huge amounts of land in the UK owned by tiny groups of landowners given over to sheep and stuff, like whole swathes of Scotland, which could be little eco-homes. There could be clusters of places like Caimabon. There could be people making straw bale houses, living in creative, environmentally friendly eco-homes. For that, the planning regulations will all need absolutely greening, and my Green Party colleagues can work on that. My dear friend Robert Hart of the Forest Garden in Wenlock Edge, he dreamt of the repeopling of the uplands of Britain in these kind of forest garden type setups. So it's not that there isn't space in the UK for everyone to have a home and a life. There is, but we have to rethink how we live in relation to the land. We need to be living in our woodlands, in our forests, in our valleys and along rivers and so on. Repeopling Britain and having less sheep, so that the ending of austerity is really, it's a totally changed mindset. So instead of austerity comes from there's not enough, I'm wealthy, I need to make sure I keep my stuff and you can't have any. So it's the rich Daily Telegraph readers, clobbering the poor. That's what we've seen. That's what's happened. Well, no, that's austerity. That doesn't work, guys. Let's finish that one. Let's have a totally changed consciousness. There is enough. There's nature. There's Britain. There's our beautiful landscape. There's our fields, our forests, our rivers, our coastlines, our fish, our animals. Everything we need to have an amazing life here. And we can share it. We can re-people the wild, but in a way that doesn't damage the environment. We don't need to build huge, great roads. We can sort of go off grid. And this is the re-greening of Britain. It's the same as the ending of austerity. And it's to do with what I call the Green New Deal, which is in the Prevailing Manifesto that I put forward. So the ending of austerity and the Green New Deal kind of come together. It's a package deal. And I'm suggesting that the Reforming Alliance should pledge to that. Now, Labour, Lib Dem, Green Party, SNP, they're all pledged to this, but they're not actually delivering, and they're not coming together and having the conversation. There's enough energy sources with sustainable energy sources to power all that stuff off-grid. We don't need huge more nuclear plants. That thing near Bristol should be cancelled, the nuclear energy plant, built with Chinese and French, expertise. Thank you, we don't need that. What we want is 1,000 myriad little lights burning, which is people generating enough energy to power their homes through the wind, through solar, etc., through water power, and through other yet to be invented things. We need Harwell to start exploring alternative energy, and gravity waves and this kind of thing. And if you think this is, ridiculous, well, I'm sorry, wake up, guys. We do need to start exploring those alternative energy sources, but properly and scientifically. I mean, Harwell does good things. It has this project called the cyclotron, which is a light-generating beam, which is being used at the moment to decipher the scrolls of Herculaneum. As a scholar, I'm extremely interested, obviously, in finding lost scrolls from antiquity, and as an expert in ancient classical pagan studies, I'm very excited about the fact they found over 100 scrolls in Herculaneum, which were buried at the time of Pompeii. They can't read them because they're charred. They were clobbered by all the ash that fell on Herculaneum, which is near Pompeii. But they're now able to read them with the use of this amazing cyclotron at Harwell, which is Britain's nuclear research establishment. And what it does, it generates light 10 billion times more powerful than the sun. 10 billion times more powerful than the sun. I mean, that's mind-boggling. Like, I look at the sun, I get blinded, I can't look at the sun for more than a few seconds. Well, 10 billion times that much light? It's mind-boggling. And yet they've been able to create that at Harwell. They then take that energy beam and they can probe into the scrolls, all carbonized and stuff, and they can read them somehow. I don't know. There's a professor there's a team of academic experts working on this, and somehow they can use that energy beam to then read these old scrolls. Now, there's an example of the good use of technology. If we can do that, for God's sake, we can crack gravity waves and things. I mean, gravity is a free universal energy. It makes everything go up and down. Poor old Newton, if he was alive, he would want a job cracking, using his knowledge of gravity to some excellent purpose, like saving the planet from global warming. So, yes, please. Right. I want to go on and say, okay, so the other thing the Remain Alliance will be pledged to is it has to agree to have a second referendum over Scotland. There's no way out of this, folks. The Scots are, beyond angry. They're incandescent. Aristotle said, any old fool can get angry, but to be angry with the right person at the right time, for the right reasons, and with the right effect, that takes wisdom. There's no point just being angry. The Scots are beyond that. They're now highly focused, intelligently angry. And with their brilliant SNP parliamentarians like Joanna Cherry and Ian Blackford and these other giants who've stood up against Brexit and used the courts, even gone to the Supreme Court to try and stop it, and managed to, get us at least this far, they deserve a second referendum. And although the Tories, if they get into power, will try and stop it, they won't be able to. It'll go to the courts, and eventually the Supreme Court say, no, they're entitled to it, The Lib Dems might try and stop it. Labour are saying, well, we're not quite sure we're going to let you have your second referendum. Well, I'm sorry, guys. None of that equivocating. Just cut to the chase. They have to be allowed to have their second referendum. And I'm speaking as someone that voted in Scotland to remain in the UK, right? I don't know what I'd vote in a second referendum, but I certainly believe they're entitled to their second referendum, or our second referendum, I should say, since I vote in Scotland. It's very complicated. I would probably now, I think, like a lot of people who did vote for keeping the UK together, I think now it's got to the point where the only possible way in which I would vote for the UK to remain with Scotland as part of it is if the UK reforms rapidly and progressively. That's why I'm putting forward this manifesto. It is actually the last call, it's the last chance to keep the UK together, because otherwise the Scots are off. And good riddance to the UK. It doesn't deserve to stay together unless it reforms, you know. So, yes, a second referendum in Scotland. Now, in order to make possible a possible, you know, suggestion for that second referendum to be, the only way, as I say, the Scots are going to stay in the Union is if it becomes a genuinely progressive, reforming and nice place to be. With this Tory madness, this arrogance and hubris of Boris Johnson, he epitomises it. But it's not only him, it's the entire, not the entire Tory party. I've known a few decent Conservatives, but it's the vast majority of the Tories that are in power. All the decent ones are being thrown out. Dominic Grieve, you know, Kenneth Clarke, even Hammond, who was a reasonably decent Tory and quite intelligent. They're all being witch hunted out. We are seeing the takeover of the Tory party. Now, who's taken it over? Well, it seems that money and big business have taken it over. And we now know a lot of that's come from Russian oligarchs who've taken out British citizenship. They've settled in Chelsea and Mayfair, and they bought their huge mansions with money they've effectively stolen from the Russian people, being energy tycoons. And they've now sort of taken over London, and they're buying their way into control of the Tory party. There's some American tycoons, Arabian, Saudi Arabian money, you know, the very wealthiest elite billionaires on the planet have flocked in to London, trying to buy the place up, and are buying their way into power and the Tory party as their chosen instrument. And these are the bankrollers of Boris Johnson. Yes, shocking, really. So what I'm saying is the Remain Alliance, which stands against all this, I mean, there's nothing wrong with wealth, there's nothing wrong with being rich. You know, it's fine in the Bible, as long as you're generous, you give to charity, you realise that all wealth comes from God and nothing lasts forever. You know, I've had times in my life I've been reasonably rich, I've had times when I'm less so, and times when I'm, you know, really poor. I mean, I've seen both ends. And I try and remain the same always, and I keep to the same values, because ultimately, you know, truth, love, justice and peaceability are what matter in life. And your soul will be judged not on how rich you were, but what spiritual qualities you cultivated, how loyal were you to your friends, how kind, how generous, etc. So the only way we can stop that oligarch takeover of our country is by having a second referendum, doing what I'm proposing, a Remain Pact. And then one of the things it has to pledge to is a written constitution. We have to have a fairer system in Britain, and that requires a written constitution. And you know, there should be a constitutional convention to draft that. I'm suggesting a royal commission. And I'm going to run through very briefly the Remain Alliance manifesto. You can read them all. I'm going to read out the headings only, okay? Point number 5, a legal inquiry hurried up into the 2016 referendum and all wrongdoing punished. The gosh, I can't even read my own writing. Okay, so second referendum in Scotland, and the next point is the Remain parties have to pledge to accept the result and implement it. So if Scotland votes for independence, as it might well do, then the rest of the UK has to find a way to accommodate that in a peaceable, loving and cooperative way. Now, if what I'm proposing is that second Scottish referendum should only come after the Brexit referendum. So hopefully the UK